DFS. It is Friday, October 8th here in Draft Shark Studios in Rochester, New York. Welcome to our Week 5 DraftKings podcast. I'm your host, Matt Schauf. With me again are Jared Smola and Mitch Carl of TeamRiserFall.com. This podcast is sponsored by our partners at FanShare Sports. FanShare curates hundreds of pieces of daily fantasy sports-related articles, tweets, and podcasts to create the most accurate ownership projections in the industry. Those projections can be found in the lineup generator on DraftSharks.com, and you can find up-to-date ownership info anytime at FanshareSports.com. Mitch, it's nice to have you back with us after a couple of weeks of life kind of dictating otherwise. I know first it was my travel, then some illness around your house. I won't get too personal, but just tell me, is your family in better shape right now than the Atlanta Falcons?
Yeah, thanks for asking, man. And I think many of our families are in better shape than the Atlanta Falcons right now. So all systems go.
Thank goodness we don't have to worry about those Falcons and setting these main slate lineups. And that's what we're talking about here is a Week 5 main slate. Jared, what are we looking at as we get into the first position at Cash QB? What do you like?
Well, there's a lot of teams in rough shape, and I'm still trying to digest all the injury news that we got today. There was a lot of surprising stuff for me at least. I had 4 quarterbacks in mind for cash originally. I'm knocking out Trey Lance now with George Kittle likely out. Obviously a big weapon in the passing game. Also probably the best blocking tight end in the NFL. So I think that's going to potentially hurt Trey Lance's rushing production as well. I'm kind of getting gun shy on Dak Prescott as well, who I was considering this morning too, but Amari Cooper, I'm worried about him. If he's going to be limited in this game, he's listed as questionable. So for me, for cash, it's going to be Jalen Hurts at $7,000. The matchup isn't ideal on the road against Carolina, but man, he's just been so good in fantasy. He has 21 plus DK points in all 4 games so far this season. He's averaging 26.8 per game. So it's either Jalen Hurts at 7,000 or Kirk Cousins, Mitch's boy, at $6,500. He gets the Lions. That's kind of all you have to say. And with Dalvin Cook either out of this game or limited, that might just push Minnesota to pass it a bit more.
Yeah, Mitch, I feel like maybe you should be cranking purple at this point, like our pal Crack Rock, a different kind of purple here. What's looking good to you at Cash QB this week on DK?
Yeah, I'm sitting at Jalen Hurts as well. We're talking about a guy who in his 4 starts last year, 25 points per game. He's just a hair above that in 2021. I kind of feel at some point this is just whom he's going to be, whether he throws the ball a bunch or not. He's just got that safe rushing floor, which is something we always look for in cash games. We're not having to worry about stacking him with anybody. We don't even really necessarily care about how good or bad the defense is across from him because we know that running quarterbacks, they're going to get theirs no matter what. So while I am interested in Daniel Jones, I'm probably going to slide him over to the GPP side, and I'll talk about that in a hot second. But Jalen Hurts right now, currently my cash game target.
Yeah, I'll go ahead. I'm not sure I can spend up to $7K for a cash QB myself because then I start building the rest of my lineup and I start feeling bad about the wideouts and the running backs I have to choose from to fill that thing out. So we'll see. Once I start building, maybe I'll change my mind. But for now, my focus is going to be on Kirk Cousins, $6,500, Daniel Jones at $6K, depending on how much I need that $500 in spending. Both of these guys are playing well. They both rank among the top 9 in PFF passing grades so far. Jones, I agree. I look at him at first and I'm like, I don't know. Do I trust Daniel Jones in a cash game? But the Cowboys are playing better on defense, but they've also allowed every opponent to attempt at least 39 passes so far. Every opponent is top 300 yards passing. So Daniel Jones, I think when you add in the rushing upside, he can have a rough game, which he hasn't really been having so far like he did last year. He can have a rough game and still deliver enough points for us here. So I feel good enough about him. But Mitch, why don't you talk about Jones now for the GPP side?
Yeah, I mean, with Daniel Jones, you never feel comfortable with him. And honestly, that was the only thing that kept him from being my cash game selection this week, is I often either looking for someone who's going to run the football, they're a little bit cheaper. Daniel Jones kind of does both of those this year. He really did check all the boxes for cash. But I guess the name bias gets in the way, and I have trouble just clearing that little hurdle. It's not a big one, but it's big enough when you're talking about looking for that safety, that floor. And he does have a decent ceiling this year as well. Now, when you're looking at the matchup, can't get any better. I mean, 23.49 points per game the Cowboys are giving up to opposing quarterbacks. Only the Washington football team has given up more points per game to quarterbacks on the main slate. So you got a great matchup, a pristine matchup. Again, the matchup's great. He's got the running floor. He's throwing the ball down the field, and he's doing it with accuracy right now. I mean, we're seeing a different Daniel Jones, all those preseason and camp videos of him just looking totally lost and everyone making fun of him on Twitter. I guess it amounted to nothing because now he's having a career year so far. I guess that is still relative to what his career has been. But Daniel Jones, man, he just looks, he's stack worthy. That game is stack worthy. The pricing on the other side is delectable. I mean, we're talking 6-1 for CD, 6-3 for Amari. Dalton Schultz is down there. He's cheap enough. Kadarius Toney, Kenny Galladay. I mean, every single piece is affordable, and no one's looking like they're going to be too highly owned.
Delectable. Mitch is looking at this game like it's a charcuterie board. Daniel Jones, for me, I wish that his face didn't look so much like a Duke basketball player, because then it would be easier to like him. But yeah, I'm pushing past that this week. Jared, what do you like for GPP quarterbacks?
Yes, I'm going to use Cousins in GPPs, stacking him with Justin Jefferson for sure. I'd probably use Tyler Conklin maybe as the double stack there. I like getting the tight end in there in my stack, and you can use DeAndre Swift or TJ Hawkinson as a run back there. I also like Justin Herbert. He's a guy I'm just going to keep playing all season. I think I just love that Chargers offense. Love the way he's playing. I think Keenan Allen is a good stack there. Of course, you can also use Austin Eckler, Mike Williams, Jared Cook. So lots of options there. And then Tom Brady I like as well. I mean, he's priced up. He's probably a bit overpriced, which hopefully keeps his ownership down. But I just think this is a game, coming off a couple down games for that offense and for Brady. I think back at home against the Dolphins, I wouldn't be surprised if Tampa puts up 40 on Sunday.
It was mentioned on the cash side, but I like this Carolina-Philly matchup. Jalen Hurts at 7K, Sam Darnold at 6,600. Probably lean toward Jalen Hurts there, but I think they're both in play. Sam Darnold showed us the ceiling last week, so we don't have to wonder if he has that. They're both projected for single-digit ownership right now. We'll see if that changes, but I think there's enough to spread it around this week to keep it from getting too heavy on either player. So I like the ownership on both of them. I like the upside on both of them. Devonte Smith is currently at 3% projected ownership. So I like that for him. He's still affordable at 5,900. He's their number one wideout. I don't trust him enough to put him in a cash lineup, but for the ultimate upside, he showed us 100-yard upside last week, and Carolina is last in the league in coverage DVOA against number one wideouts this year. There's game stack options on both sides. So if you're playing either quarterback and a stacked receiver, there are guys on the other side that look good. I'm especially attracted by Robbie Anderson, GPP setup this week. He's at 5K. He's at 4% projected ownership right now. He's coming off 11 targets. So he had everything last week except the production. And, maybe that doesn't happen again this week. But if he gets the same kind of use this week that he did last week, I think he'll probably at least be fine for us.
Robert Woods got going last night. So, maybe Robbie can follow suit on Sunday.
That's right. The wheels are squeaking. They're getting their grease now. Running back, Mitch, what do you like for cash?
Interesting slate, I think, when I'm looking at the pricing, especially as we continue forward. I don't think there's that many of these high-end players that I want to pay up for, honestly. There's only a couple at each position. And because of all the value, especially at the wide receiver position, which I know we'll be doing next, I'm finding a hard time not just slamming in Derrick Henry and just going from there. It just seems like it's too easy to get to him today or this weekend. And when we're looking at the pricing of the rest of the position, I'm slamming in Derrick Henry. I feel confident about it. And then down there in the 5K, 6K range, you have a plethora of options that really do look interesting. I don't think Chuba Hubbard is a terrible pick at 6K. I know he didn't have the greatest first game out. But, part of that had to do with Sam Darnold vulturing 2 goal line touchdowns. He's had 4 rushing touchdowns in the past 2 games, 5 in the season. Even if he doesn't get a rushing touchdown this weekend, and you do think that this team's going to be scoring on Philly, well, then you need to be investing in either A, Darnold throwing the football for 3 touchdowns, or Chuba Hubbard running something in, because this team's going to score some points against the Eagles. So no matter what, I think you're on one side of it. You're either using Darnold with some stacks or you're using Chuba Hubbard. One way or another, they're going to score some points. So I like him a lot. I think he's a fantastic price tag at 6K. And I know that it's probably more of a GPP leaning play, but I don't care. I'm okay with it. I feel confident in his week he's got coming up. I think a lot of people will be looking at Damien Williams as well. He'll be a fine option. Alexander Mattison, we need to keep tabs on what's going on with Delvin Cook. If Cook is out, he's a lock. You just start your lineup with Henry in the RB1 and then put Madison in the RB2, and you just go from there for the rest of your cash game build. So just pay attention to the inactives before slate starts.
Yeah, who knew Adam Gase was keeping Sam Darnold from turning into Steve Young? Jared, what do you like for a cash running back here?
Yeah, I'm with Mitch on Derrick Henry. I mean, especially with Christian McCaffrey out again this week, Henry just easily the safest volume bet in fantasy right now. I like Saquon Barkley at $7,300. I think he's underpriced for the fact that he's back to a workhorse role. He looks like he's back to himself. I mean, both of those touchdowns he had against the Saints last week were super impressive. So I think he's the Saquon Barkley of old, and that should be an $8,000 running back. Maybe mid eights. So I think he's underpriced. I think we also have to consider Samaje Perine just because he's $4,000. I don't really want to play him, but I mean, he kind of makes lineups work at that price. I think he's going to be the pretty clear leader in carries on Sunday, and the matchup's good against Green Bay. I do think Chris Evans will mix in on passing down, so that hurts a bit. If Perine was $5,000, I think he would be someone we didn't want to play in cash games. But at $4,000 for a guy who should get 15 or so touches, I think he's at least worth considering. I don't think he's a must play, but I think you should make rosters with him just to kind of see what it helps you get in there.
I get the case for him, but I think that I can find $1,200 to get up to Leonard Fournette, who I think is everything that I'm hoping Samaje Perine is going to be. Probably a better bet for those pass targets, and he's in a much better offense. He's in $3 wins. Fournette has seen 16, 15, and then 25 opportunities. So I'm not going to count on the 25 like last week, but we know that that's at least possible. I'll take 15 or 16 if that's what it is, especially if it includes 4 receptions. He's just RB25 in PPR points so far. He's done that without scoring a touchdown, though. The only running back ahead of him in the PPR ranks right now in total points is Chase Edmonds. That doesn't have a touchdown so far is Chase Edmonds. Chase Edmonds costs $700 more on DK. He's questionable this week. So I like Leonard Fournette in that range of running backs that are going to make you queasy. Not talking about guys that make you feel good, but it's 5,200 for a guy with upside. And the matchup I didn't even mention. The Dolphins have allowed the 3rd most PPR points to the position so far. So even if he just punches one in and doesn't get as many touches, I'll take the chances for any of those eventualities. Mitch, what do you like for a tournament running back?
Yeah, I was looking at it a little bit while you were talking too, and just looking at some of the cash options this week. It's going to be hard to get off of them in tournaments a little bit as well, because nobody's ownership really looks like it's through the roof. So I think with the ownership being kind of flat, you're looking at more of an optimal approach to building your lineups this week, and not really being concerned about ownership, not being concerned about leveraging anything. And you just want to build the best lineups that can outscore everybody else. And when you're doing something like that, you are starting to look at the matchups. This is when statistics and trends and things like that do come into play beyond just the correlation and how you construct your lineup. And I think these things matter this week a little bit more than they usually do. With that in mind, Detroit Lions giving up the most points per game to opposing running backs in the main slate. The next team, the Dolphins against Tampa, who you just mentioned at Leonard Fournette at 5-2. Philadelphia Eagles are the 3rd worst on the slate against Chuba Hubbard. And then you've got the Raiders against Damien Williams. They're the 4th worst. The next one, the Jaguars against Derrick Henry, and so on and so forth. You can continue to go down this list, and all of these running backs who are mid-tier price players, they're in phenomenal matchups. I see the path in GPPs, honestly, just kind of rotating around these different players. If you're firing off a single entry, you could probably even get away with slamming in Derrick Henry at 27, 28% ownership, and it's not really going to hurt you. It's just not going to. There's so many other great options on the slate that I think ownership's just going to be flat across the board. Now, if you're really trying to get different, you're playing a million maker, okay. Then we're looking at guys like Aaron Jones. You want that awkward priced upper mid-tier type guy, or the 2nd tier, I should say, running back, 7.4, 7.6K. Austin Eckler, another guy there. They're all, 10-ish% ownership. They're not going to be too chalky, and they all have 30, 40 point upside in any given week. Aaron Jones with 3 receiving touchdowns. You can even get a little funky and use, Aaron Rodgers with Aaron Jones, and then running back on the other side with, Tyler Boyd and Jamar Chase. You can get interesting like that in those big tournaments.
Mm-hmm. Jared, what you got?
Yeah, Aaron Jones was on my list here. I do, I think Mitch called it an awkward price. I agree. I think he's probably a bit overpriced at $7,900. But I mean, Jones already has a 40-point DraftKings game this season. He had one of those last year. He had 2 other games of 26 plus DK points last year. He just has that massive ceiling, and coming off a couple of disappointing games now, he is going to be super low owned. So he's interesting. The other 2 guys interesting to me are the Browns running backs. The Chargers are a run funnel defense. They are much stronger against the pass than the run. It's by design too. I mean, just how they play. They keep those safeties back. They kind of invite you to run. Teams are running at the Chargers at one of the highest rates in the NFL. I'm curious to see if Brandon Staley changes up that game plan against Cleveland, who is in my mind the best running team in the NFL. But if they don't, I think Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt can both have big games here, and their prices are both down from where they've been most of the season. Chubb at $6,700, Kareem Hunt $5,800. So I think especially in Charger stacks, I like running it back with one of those Browns running backs.
I was noticing the lack of real concentration in those ownership rates too, Mitch. And I think that I'm trying in that to look at the highest ceiling guys and not look so much at guys comparing ownerships. I do like that Zeke is coming in at lower than Saquon Barkley coming off of Barkley's big game, especially because they both are coming off of big games. And Zeke Elliott costs $300 less than Saquon Barkley. I know that the downside is not as much receiving upside to Zeke, but he has the 100-yard upside. The Giants have been a positive matchup. They've been a better scoring matchup by our adjusted fantasy points allowed for running backs than Dallas has so far this season. So I think Zeke gives you that 100-yard bonus potential here. They've allowed 2 100-yard rushers have the Giants so far, and Dallas is tied for the highest implied total on the slate. So it should be good game conditions for Zeke getting plenty of touches here. And again, regardless of his price versus Barkley, I think $7K is a good price for what Zeke has been as a producer and the touches he's gotten over the past couple weeks after we worried about him coming off of week 1. Wideouts for cash, Mitch. What do you like?
I think there's a lot of value here, and I'm going to go at the very high end of the wide receiver spot because, I was talking about it a little bit before. I think that mid-tier of running backs is kind of where I'm going in cash this week on DraftKings. So I want to target the high-end wide receivers. A few of them I'm looking at, they just kind of pop off the page for me at the very top. Devonte Adams, hard not to go with a guy who has, just about a 15 or so point floor, even on a bad week. And he can go out there and win you every single game you're entered into, head-to-heads, double-ups, and everything with a 40-something point explosion on any given week. Justin Jefferson had scored 17.8 or more points in 8 out of the last 11 games he's been involved in. The kid just keeps on scoring in multiple different ways, whether he's, racking up the yardage, getting the 3-point bonus, getting the touchdowns, getting the receptions. He does it all now. He's really well-rounded. DJ Moore at 7.5K. I do not like the price tag, but my goodness, it's hard not to like the player. So I like him in cash as well. Deante Johnson. Deante Johnson is literally the perfect cash game play. The guy is just a target hog, and he catches everything this year. He's not dropping passes like he was last year, and it's hard for me not to pay there at 6.5 for Deante Johnson. If I do pay down this week, it would be for guys like Jacoby Myers. I don't mind him. It's a guy who has 9+ targets in 3 or 4 games. He is racking up mid-teens type points. Antonio Brown, I really like at 5.2K. I think he narrowly missed out on having an explosive game this past week. Looked like he dropped a touchdown. Could have had a second one, looked over the wrong shoulder at one point. We could be looking at a game where everyone saw Antonio Brown go 9 for 150 and 2 scores, and his price tag would be 6.8K, 7K this week, and he'd be the guy everyone's using instead of Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. So I like Antonio Brown down there at 5.2K. Tyler Boyd is down there as well. T. Higgins, Laviska Shenault. The list goes on. There are so many really, really good price players this week, and everyone seems to be attainable depending on whatever your goal is, whatever you're playing, and however you plan on constructing your roster. I think it's a very easy week to build. We'll find out who did it right on Monday.
Yeah, and if you do need even a little bit more savings or just another option in that range, Laviska Shenault is near those guys at 4,800 this week. Nicely priced for a top 2 receiver on his team. Terrific matchup against the Titans. Tennessee's a bad defense all around. They're providing the 5th largest boost to wide receiver scoring by our adjusted fantasy points allowed so far this season. Shenault led the team by 4 targets last week when they, of course, lost DJ Chark at the beginning of the game. Saw 29% target share in that game. Even got a deep throw. So we know that that's a thing. We know that that is possible. I don't know how much it'll happen, but we know that it's possible it can happen. It's hard to imagine Shenault falling outside the top 2 in targets among Jaguars going forward, unless it's finally time for Tavon Austin to pay off. Jared, what do you think at cash wideout?
Yeah, I like Shenault at that price. I like Kadarius Toney, who I ended up using in cash last week. He's only up a bit to 4,000 this week. He just stepped into Sterling Shepard's role last week, and Shepard was super productive in the first few games. Toney was productive, obviously, last week. Led the team with 9 targets, caught 6 of them for $78. Like that for 78 yards. That's awesome usage for a receiver at $4,000. So I like him. And then going back near the top, Keenan Allen to me is still underpriced, $6,500. his fantasy production has kind of lagged the usage so far this season, but he is third among all wide receivers in targets. He's top 10 in both the red zone targets and end zone targets. He's fifth in our expected fantasy points model. So he is getting, top 10 wide receiver usage. The production hasn't come yet, but I think it's going to come. And we're kind of getting that discount on him because he's disappointed so far.
You can tell how highly Jared thinks of Kadarius Toney because he's just converting his yards to dollars right there in his words. Mitch, what do you like for the GPP side at wideout?
Oh, well, I think a lot of people are going to be liking Laviska Shenault down there. I think Kadarius Toney will be semi-popular because of the game stack that people will want to include him in. So if I'm looking to try to get a little bit different, I want to stay in that price range. Jalen Waddle, I actually think he's in a really interesting spot this week. Tampa Bay giving up the most points on the slate against opposing wide receivers. Their secondary is absolutely ravaged right now. And Devontae Parker is labored right now. I believe his hip is flared up again, or hamstring, one or the other. And that means Jalen Waddle, and we already have Will Fuller on the IR, by the way. Don't overlook that. Jalen Waddle might find himself getting a little bit more of those intermediate targets, maybe down the field a couple shots, not hovering around the line of scrimmage or the first down marker. So if Jalen Waddle can get, peppered with targets against a team that I think will be playing from ahead, you've got a perfect scenario for him to go out there and get 12, 13, 14 targets and really splash if he can have himself a game. So I like Jalen Waddle down there. I'm really just trying to target some of those players that are centered around some other big names people are excited about. Devonte Smith, I think, is sandwiched between a couple very popular options. I always try to look for those awkwardly priced players, right? Aaron Jones, he was that at running back. I think Devonte Smith is there at wide receiver. He's in between CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper, Kenny Galladay, Jamar Chase, and those four guys on either side of them. I mean, you could keep going a few $100s more, and you're looking at Chris Godwin and AJ Brown. So everyone I just named was within $500 up or down the salary scale. And he's just going to be sitting there in between them all against Carolina, a team not giving up a lot of passing yards or points to opposing wide receivers. But Devonta Smith is an elite route runner already in his rookie season. I already like Jalen Hurts. I like this game for stacks. So those are two guys that really pop off the page for me. I think they'll both be low owned. I think they have tremendous upside this week.
Mm-hmm. Jared, what about you?
Yeah, I love the Waddle call. I'll be using him in my Bucks stacks as the Dolphins run back. I'm all in on AJ Brown though. I hope he just flies under the radar. We'll see. I don't even know what his projected ownership is, but he was a full go in practice on both Thursday and Friday, not even listed on the final injury report. So that tells us the hamstring should be behind him. Julio Jones out of this game, so Brown should be the target hog that we kind of were hoping he was going to be the season before the Titans acquired Julio Jones. And the matchup obviously is perfect. The Jags 32nd in Football Outsiders pass defense DVOA. Football Outsider says them 24th in coverage against number one wide receivers. And we know Brown is a high ceiling player. So hopefully he, keeps flying under the radar and doesn't get too popular.
That's who I have for all of those reasons. So I'm going to spin us ahead to tight end. And Jared, please, if a time machine comes about, do not tell past me that I'm about to say this, but it might be Mike Gesicki week. The Bucs are down two cornerbacks who are on IR. They're down Antoine Winfield this week, who has a concussion. Will Fuller is on IR. Devontae Parker is a game-time decision. You have guys mentioned Jalen Waddle already. Coverage is probably Devin White's greatest weakness, so that's another potential knock for the middle of the field where Gesicki should be working. And the Bucs are 10-point favorites here, so there should be passing volume for the Dolphins. There's nothing to dislike, even for me, who spends the end of the week looking for reasons to dislike Mike Gesicki. I couldn't find anything this week. He's fifth in our dollars per point projections. And really the only reason he's not higher than that is because everybody ahead of him costs at least $500 less in DK salary. It should, as long as he doesn't get hurt in this game, he should at the very least be decent for us. And the ceiling is very high, as we've already seen with double-digit targets from him in a game.
Yeah, the concern with Gesicki is there'll be some games where he'll just get phased out for whatever reason. But, with Fuller on IR and Parker banged up, like Miami can't really phase him out of this game.
And even Jakeem Grant already left town. So they're setting it up. The table is set for Gesicki Day. And I'm going to feel bad by the end of it. Win or lose.
Yeah, and whenever it's Gesicki Day, that's when he busts. So that's why I'm kind of leaning towards Tyler Conklin in cash to save the $700. I do like Gesicki, by the way, but I'll go with Conklin here to save the money. The production wasn't big last week, but he saw another 6 targets. He's 11th among tight ends now in total targets. He set a season high in route rate last week at 73%. And, the Lions, of course, are bad at defending everything. Football Outsiders actually has them dead last in tight end coverage, and they're 23rd in adjusted fantasy points allowed to tight ends.
Mitch, what do you like at cash tight end?
Yeah, so Dalton Schultz is kind of sliding in there a little bit above Gesicki for me. I do like Gesicki a lot. I mean, he's had 18 targets and 79 dropbacks from Jacoby Brissett, so he's getting a little over 20% target share there, which is phenomenal at the tight end position. I mean, that's elite level market share. So I do like Gesicki a lot. I think it's a perfect storm without Devontae Parker there as well, and no Will Fuller. And they're going to be playing from behind. He's going to have to throw the football. So I like him a lot, but more so for tournaments because it is Mike Gesicki. I think he is underrated athletically, though. I know we're kind of dogging the play, but the old Penn State tight end there. He's got some more athleticism than I think a lot of people think when they think of his name. The player I'm really looking at, though, is Dalton Schultz. He's had 7 and 8 targets. He had 6 in week 1, so it's not like he wasn't already included in the game plan. Now he gets the Giants giving up the 3rd most points per game to opposing tight ends on the slate. I really like his price tag at 4.4. One thing I always look for in tight ends, very similar to my running backs, is what is their equity going to be in? Is it a touchdown equity guy? Is he a PPR equity guy? On DraftKings, I'm looking for that PPR equity. Well, Schultz kind of covers both right now. He's had 3 touchdowns over the past 2 weeks. Tight ends, we know a lot of their value comes from inside the red zone as well. Well, this team is implied to score 29.5 points. So you've got kind of the perfect storm there. Someone who's catching the ball a lot, is being targeted a lot. He's getting the red zone targets on top of that. And the team is implied for 29.5 points. Schultz checks all the boxes at 4.4K. He's my cash play.
My FFPC main event team hopes that you're right because I chose to play him over Tyler Higbee for that stack with Dak Prescott. So fingers crossed for Dalton Schultz paying off. On the tourney side, a tight end for me, I like Noah Fant at $4,900. I think that could be the awkward price for this position. We talked about that at wide receiver and running back. Fant's already led the team in targets twice this season, so we already know he's capable of doing that. It's a pass funnel matchup against Pittsburgh. They play the run much tougher than the pass so far. Albert Okwuegbunam is out, so we don't have to say his name for a couple of weeks at least. Cortland Sutton is questionable for this game after he hurt an ankle on Friday. So suddenly there's even more target upside to Noah Fant. I don't even care which quarterback is starting this game because he can work with either of them. He can work at any level of the field. I like the upside, and I don't think that the ownership is going to get too high on him, but we'll see where that goes Sunday morning.
Yeah, it looks like it's going to be Bridgewater, which I think will be good news for Noah Fant. So, yeah, he's a guy I was all out on like 2 days ago, and now I really like him this week for all the reasons you mentioned, Matt. So I do like Gesicki for tournaments. I like Robert Tonyan too, who no one's going to want to play because he's been a total disappointment so far this season. But, first game last week without Marquez Valdes-Scantling, season high 7 targets for Robert Tonyan, season high 83% route rate. Like those are elite metrics for a tight end. And he's still 7th among, he's 4th among tight ends in red zone targets with 7 of them through 4 weeks. So he's still getting the chances. He just hasn't converted them yet. We know how volatile touchdowns can be. So, that Packers-Bengals game has a pretty high over-under. I think it's at 51. It could be a sneaky shootout. And I do still think Tonyan is, one of the better touchdown bets at the position.
Yeah, this is absolutely the place where it makes sense to give him a shot. Mitch, what do you think at GPP tight end?
Yeah, this one's an interesting one for me. It's Cameron Brate. He was even outsnapped last week by O.J. Howard. Howard only had 1 target, though. Cameron Brate had 6. Had a couple downfield targets. Did not look on the same page with Tom Brady, though. But I think that is something that they can rectify. And we know Brate can already catch the touchdowns. Again, we know a lot of the value comes from inside the red zone for opposing tight ends and especially if they're going to be at home and they're playing with a big lead and they're going to have a nice high implied team total. He's a nice price tag. He's got the GOAT at 44 years old throwing the football. It's just a lot to like there at Cameron Brate. So I'm going to be going with him as one of my favorite, and I'm not even joking, one of my favorite options on the entire slate this week. He's kind of right in there with the Jalen Waddle mix, where I feel like some of these guys are just going overlooked. And I think we've got these perfect storms brewing for a few players this week. And, we could be looking at a Cameron Brate, mini Gronk type performance, maybe 6 for 60 and 2 touchdowns. Something like that would win you a million maker if the rest of your stack works out. I don't know if he can get there, but I also do like that as kind of a little bit of leverage off of Leonard Fournette, whose value will also inherently be tied into being able to pound in the rock inside the 5 or something like that. Take away the red zone carry from him. If it goes to Brate in the back of the end zone on a play action, you're dancing in your living room on Sunday afternoon. So I like me some Cameron Brate.
And to be fair, for getting on the same page with this quarterback, Tom Brady's a lot older, so they're probably reading different books. Defenses, I like the Eagles starting out at 2,200 just for that price, and they're facing Sam Darnold, who does still have some Sam Darnold to him, even though he's got fancy feet now. Philly's talented in the pass rush. It's inconsistent, but there is upside to get after Sam Darnold in this game. Washington at 2,300 if we're talking price too against Jameis Winston. The Washington has stunk on defense so far, have been one of the biggest disappointments in the NFL, looking across positions, whatever. But they get Jameis Winston this week at $2,300. So there's enough upside there for it to make sense. Jared, what do you like for defense?
Yeah, I was going back between Philly and Washington for who I wanted to write up for my cash game article this week. And I did go with Washington. They are at home versus, the Eagles are on the road. The Saints are missing two of their offensive linemen too, left tackle and center. And like you said, Matt, is still Jameis Winston. That Washington pass rush is still good. They're going to have a game here where they get, 5 or 6 sacks. And I think this is a decent time for it if they can force the Saints to, pass the ball more than 15 times.
Yeah, it's still talented, but they haven't really been getting it done. Chase Young is without a sack, but with no left tackle for New Orleans, this might be the time for it. Mitch, what do you like?
Yeah, I like the New Orleans Saints on defense. And in the same game there, I actually really like them for cash games this week. They are weirdly priced as the 10th most expensive defense on the slate at 3.1K, but they're averaging the most points per game, over 10 points per game in the season. And it's not like it came out of nowhere. This was happening in 2019. They were pretty good in 2018 as well, and all the way back to 2017. This defense has been solid for years, and now they're going against a team that is potentially missing Curtis Samuel and Diami Brown. Maybe they're going to be able to lock down or at least bracket coverage Terry McLaurin, and you've got a injured, at least a labored Antonio Gibson. Who's going to move the football for Washington? So I really like the Saints defense. And no, it's not the greatest spot ever. Taylor Heinicke has looked pretty good. I mean, the kid is not really turning the ball over like crazy. I think just 3 on the year, which is fantastic, coming in relief halfway through the first game. So the matchup is pretty good for them. I don't think it's pristine or anything, but I think the upside and the floor is just kind of built in due to their talent.
Mm-hmm. I think in that same range, I like the Vikings at $3,000. If I get to the end of my build and I'm like, I can spend another $700-800 on my defense. Vikings get the Lions, who are down at least 2 key O-line starters. Their center, their left tackle. They might be without Penei Sewell, who's questionable for the game. So, I mean, it really could just get ugly in that one. That is going to do it for this Week 5 DraftKings podcast. Head over to DraftSharks.com to get more player recommendations. If you're a DS insider, then you can check out Jared's cash game picks as well as top GPP options from Corey Bushland. You can also mess around with our lineup generator to build your own lineups with the help of the DS projections and FanShare ownership projections. For more discussion of DFS and other formats, you can also join the free DraftSharks Discord. You can find the link to do that in the description for this podcast. If you are with us on the stream, stick around. We're going to say goodbye to Mitch, and then Jared and I will hit the FanDuel side after a quick break. For Jared Smola, Mitch Carl, and the rest of the Draft Sharks crew, I'm Matt Schaaf saying thanks so much for swimming with us. It is Friday, October 8th here at Draft Shark Studios in Rochester, New York. Welcome to our Week 5 FanDuel podcast. I'm your host, Matt Schaaf. With me, as always, is Jared Smola. And this podcast is sponsored by our partners at FanShare Sports. FanShare curates hundreds of pieces of daily fantasy sports-related articles, tweets, and podcasts to create the most accurate ownership projections in the industry. Those projections can be found in the lineup generator tool on DraftSharks.com, and you can find up-to-date ownership info anytime at FanshareSports.com. Jared, cash QB, what do you like on FanDuel this week?
Yeah, I see viable options kind of at every pricing level. I think Kyler Murray, $8,500. He's easy enough to get it in FanDuel. You don't really, need to make an argument for Kyler Murray. Kirk Cousins at $7,500. The Vikings are implied for 29 points. That's the second highest on the main slate behind only the Cowboys. They obviously get that Lions matchup. And Cousins coming off a down game, but he had 20-plus FanDuel points in each of the first 3 weeks of the season. So I think he's a nice play in kind of that middle tier. And if you want to go cheap, I like Trevor Lawrence for $6,500. He's coming off what I thought was his best game as a passer last week. Pro Football Focus agreed. He had his highest PFF grade of the season. And he also, did the most he's done all season on the ground. 8 carries for 36 yards and a score. So if he's starting to improve as a passer and going to add some value with his legs, Lawrence is a guy who could work his way into the 7,000s pretty quickly here. So I think we're getting a nice discount on him at $6,500.
Yeah, I can always get behind a cheap quarterback. I find that on FanDuel, when I start there, I get to the end, I'm like, I don't need that guy. I can go up for more expensive. Kirk Cousins, I really like, and at $7,500, I don't have to go all the way up to the 8K guys. I get somebody who's been performing, as you mentioned. He's been, last week against Cleveland was his first game under 22 FanDuel points. And, that was his worst matchup so far. So it's understandable for a down game. I'm not too worried about another one. They actually have even gotten a bump in implied points. So they're tied with Dallas in the live implied here. So tied with Dallas for tops in the main slate. They expect to score points. Dalvin Cook is hurt. So if they do score points, Kirk Cousins is probably going to be heavily involved, maybe even more heavily than usual. So yeah, I like him at 7,500. As you said, you don't have to make a case for the 8K guys. I'm looking there on the GPP side because I'm more willing to go for the cheaper players at running back and wide receiver. And on the GPP side, Jared, obviously we want upside everywhere, but I think ultimate ceiling especially matters here for our tournament lineups. With Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson all off the main slate, Kyler Murray and Jalen Hurts stand out to me as those ultimate ceiling guys who can score on the ground and throw multiple touchdown passes this week. Murray just $400 more than Jalen Hurts this week, so pretty easy to get to him from Jalen Hurts if you're looking at both of those guys. Kyler Murray has enough wide receivers to differentiate with. That said, I don't think that being $400 away from Kyler Murray knocks Jalen Hurts out of consideration because his game is more interesting overall for game stacking purposes. It's going to be tough to differentiate with Niners players on the other side of that Arizona matchup, but Philly, Carolina has lots of options, and Hurts has been over 21 fantasy points every game so far. Probably hasn't even hit his ceiling yet because he lost 2 to 3 touchdowns last week to penalties.
Yeah, I like the Kyler call. I kind of like stacking Kyler with DeAndre Hopkins too. Hopkins is disappointed the past couple of weeks, but he scored, I believe it was 3 touchdowns in the first 2 weeks of the season. He's off the injury report now, so the rib thing is behind him. So I like that call. I like Kirk Cousins in tournaments too. Cousins checks in as our number 2 quarterback value, and then Justin Jefferson is our number 3 wide receiver value. So you get the correlation there. Both guys are values in their own right. So I like that stack for tournaments. I like Tom Brady with Mike Evans on FanDuel here. Evans kind of the better FanDuel play anyways with this touchdown scoring ability, and he's only $7,000 on FanDuel. So I think he's a good value. Then I also like Justin Herbert with Keenan Allen. I'm just going to be using the Chargers pretty much every week in tournaments. I think they're just an offense that's going to win a lot of money this season.
Yeah, I think if you're making a bunch of lineups, it makes sense to work in the Chargers, especially if they're not going to be particularly highly owned. Is there anything to dislike about Justin Herbert? I mean, he doesn't even look like he's ever going to get annoying off the field because he's too shy.
Exactly.
Running back for cash, Jared, what do you like?
Saquon Barkley here. Talked about him on DraftKings. I think it's the same story on FanDuel. I think his price just hasn't caught up to the fact that, to me, he looks like he's back to 100%. And his usage is back to where it was pre-ACL injury. 29 carries and 13 targets. 13 targets, especially over the past 2 weeks, is sort of what you want to see if you're a Barkley investor. Fine matchup against the Cowboys. This game I expect to be high scoring, which helps. And then the Cowboys are 19th in Football Outsiders run defense ranking, so nothing to worry about for the matchup for Saquon.
Yeah, Barkley and Austin Eckler are both very reasonably priced. They're both still short of 8K. I'm guessing that it helped Eckler's price over here that his big game came on Monday night, so the prices are already come out for week 5. And the other thing that I like about both of these guys is that they're such pass run combos that no matter how the game goes, they're going to be involved. If Dallas jumps out to a lead, if Cleveland is taking things away from the Chargers, either of these guys could catch, 7 passes or more in the game. So they're going to be involved. They're going to score points. They're fairly safe. And I think they're reasonably enough priced that, you're probably going to want to play Derrick Henry. It's possible to build a lineup with all the values at other spots with Barkley and Eckler and Derrick Henry in it. I'm definitely going to try that to see just how doable it is before I go any further with it.
Yeah, I like that.
GPP side, what do you like at running back?
I love Nick Chubb on FanDuel. Talked about him on DraftKings. I think he's an even better play on FanDuel here with the half PPRs. That's always the concern with Chubb is he doesn't do much in the passing game, but the Chargers so much tougher against the pass than the run. Football Outsider says him 4th in pass defense. they're 25th against the run. So, a run heavy Browns offense to begin with should kind of lean in that direction even more. I could see this being one of those big, 150-yard, 2-touchdown games for Chubb.
And you like being able to use him like that and game stacking with the Chargers, because if Nick Chubb has a big game, then you assume Cleveland's going to get out ahead of the Chargers and they have to throw to come back, which they already want to do more of anyway. So, Nick Chubb jumped out to me. He's at single-digit projected ownership right now, which makes him even more attractive, $7,500, a great price. The ailing Baker Mayfield, we knew that the shoulder was an issue. We found out this week he's playing through a torn labrum that has him wearing a harness. That hasn't kept him out of the lineup. It probably doesn't severely limit their passing volume versus what they want to do normally, but it's at least a little bit more motivation to run the ball. It's a run favoring offense anyway. And Nick Chubb is running efficiently as usual, 5.2 yards per carry on the year. So like all of those factors, I'm on Nick Chubb as well. Wide receiver for cash, Jared, what are you favoring?
So Devonte Adams is just too cheap at $8,200 on FanDuel here. I think Keenan Allen is too cheap as well at $7,200. He's a top 10 wide receiver in usage. He's top 10 in targets. He's top 10 in red zone targets. He's fifth in our expected fantasy points. So I like Keenan Allen. So those two pricier guys. And for a cheap, guy for your third wide receiver spot, I think Jalen Waddle and Kadarius Toney, $5,400 for Waddle, $5,300 for Toney. I think they're both really nice target bets for that price tag. Waddle gets a Bucs team that we know is much stronger against the run than the pass. Teams are passing against the Bucs at easily the highest rate in the NFL. The Fins are going to be behind in this game from the start. So you're going to get 40 plus pass attempts, I think, from Jacoby Brissett, and you have no Will Fuller. You have Devontae Parker banged up. So Waddle, really should see like 8+ targets in this game. And then kind of the same deal with Kadarius Toney. I think the Giants will be playing from behind the Cowboys. He already saw 9 targets last week in that slot role. And with Sterling Shepard out again this week, I think you're going to see, similar usage for Toney.
Yeah, I especially like Jalen Waddle this week at $5,400. I mean, I think that if Devontae Parker were fully healthy, you could say, I don't know who the number one receiver is between them, but he's not. He's a game time decision. So that makes me lean toward Jalen Waddle as, the lead receiver. I don't know if I'm about a true number one, but should see lots of targets. I think it's tough to, write the game story of Miami passing the ball a lot and not throwing a lot at Jalen Waddle in this game as long as he doesn't get hurt. We mentioned it on the other show, but again, Bucs are down 2 corners who are on IR. Antoine Winfield is out for this game with a concussion. Will Fuller is on IR. Devontae Parker, game time decision, I already mentioned. So the middle of the field, even deep with Antoine Winfield not around, could be vulnerable in a game that we expect Miami to be trailing. We expect the passing volume to be up. So I think there should be a bunch of targets for Jalen Waddle and Mike Gesicki, who we'll get to in a minute, I promise. And we've already seen that happen with both of these guys. We've had a game where Jacoby Brissett targeted both of them 12+ times. So we don't even have to just guess at what's going to happen. We know it's possible.
Yeah, the thing with Waddle too is he's like being used and has produced like Juju Smith-Schuster so far. But he's not Juju Smith. He has that big play upside. We just haven't seen it yet. But even on the short passes, he's capable of taking one of those to the house.
Mm-hmm. He's a rich man's Kadarius Toney. GPP side. You got to tout him on the DraftKings show, so I'm going to mention over here AJ Brown at $6,900 is just cheaper than he should be for who he is. It's understandable why he's down there because he hasn't really done anything yet this year. He's coming off an injury, but he is back from that injury. So the fact that he's a week removed from the hamstring makes me not want to play him in a cash lineup because you never know how likely a recurrence is. But on the tournament side, the upside makes it very easy to like him at the $6,900. Even easier because Julio Jones is not back from his hamstring injury yet. So that should help the target outlook. The matchup's great against Jacksonville. They can't really stop anything that they want to. So it should come down to what the Titans want to give A.J. Brown. And really, after the way it's been for him over the first 3 games that he was around for, they should want to get him going and just kind of, I don't know, get him mentally there after a rough start. So I'd like everything lining up for the big game potential for A.J. Brown.
I mean, they probably shouldn't keep giving Derrick Henry 30 carries a game. So it'd probably be good to, get A.J. Brown 10 targets in this one. So I love A.J. Brown in tournaments. I feel like I have to go back to Odell Beckham in tournaments because I was all in on him last week. It was there. Like 150 yards and 2 touchdowns was there if Baker had just played a better game. OBJ was 10th in expected fantasy points last week. He was like 70th in actual fantasy points, but he's seen 25% of the Browns targets over the last 2 weeks. So a great target share. He's second among all wide receivers in air yards over that span. So the usage is there. Baker's play and that left shoulder injury is a concern. Matchup isn't ideal against the Chargers, but for $6,400 for the type of upside we know Beckham has, I think he's a great tournament play.
I'm going to guess he doesn't go in the same lineups where you have Nick Chubb.
Correct.
But you can also run him back with the Chargers guys that you like, because if the Chargers jump out to a lead, they're probably scoring points through the air, and Cleveland's going to have to throw the ball a little bit more than they want to.
Yep.
Tight end for cash. What are you playing?
Your boy Mike Gesicki here, $5,600. I do think TJ Hawkinson and Darren Waller check in as our top $2 per point values. I would not play Hawkinson in cash with his knee issue. He's listed as questionable. Made it sound like when he was interviewed on Friday that he's probably going to play, but he's definitely not 100%. So I'd avoid him in cash. But Gesicki for $5,600, 18 targets over the last 2 weeks for Gesicki, with Jacoby Brissett under center. As we mentioned, we have Devontae Parker banged up now, Will Fuller out of this game. So Gesicki, I hate to call him a safe target bet because, he's had games where we think he's a safe target bet and then he sees like 1 or 2 targets. But tough to imagine him not getting, 6+ targets here. Again, in what should be a pass-heavy game plan for Miami, and with all those wide receiver injuries.
Yeah, we should put finger quotes around anything that we call safe in the NFL, because that's what makes this difficult. Is anything can happen in a given game. He could see 2 targets just because that's how it went. But as far as safe things go in projecting NFL, everything is lined up for Mike Gesicki to get lots of targets this week. So yeah, I have him down on the cash side. $5,600 is a great price. So I don't see how he doesn't get to at least 6 or 7 targets in this game. We'll see where it goes. GPP side, Noah Fant, $5,900. It's the same 2 tight ends I mentioned on the DraftKings show. It's for all the same reasons, and it's for very similar reasons between them. Noah Fant also dealing with injuries in his offense. We've got Albert Okwuegbunam is out this week. He landed on IR, so he's going to be out at least 3 weeks. Actually, no, I'm sorry. He's not on IR yet. The Broncos said they would decide by Saturday if he's going on IR. So it sounds like it's a fairly significant hamstring injury. Knocks him out at least for Sunday against Pittsburgh, which is a pass funneling matchup. They're playing the run tough. 6th, I think, in DVOA, maybe 7th in run defense DVOA, in the 20s in pass defense DVOA. So we should be seeing more passing. Should be plenty of targets available for Noah Fant. Even more if Cortland Sutton is unable to play. He's questionable after hurting an ankle on Friday. So love the target outlook for Fant. I think Fant is certainly cash playable. I just think that Mike Gesicki is a little bit safer than Noah Fant, and $300 cheaper, but I wouldn't argue if people want to play Fant instead.
Yeah, I agree there. I like Fant for tournaments especially. I like Robert Tonyan again here. Talked about him on the DraftKings show, but season high in both route rate and targets for Tonyan last week. He hasn't scored touchdowns yet, and that can be volatile from week to week, season to season even. But I do still think he has nice touchdown upside, especially with Marquez Valdez scaling out for the Packers. And I want to throw out Jared Cook too. I'm not sure how popular he's going to be after a nice game in that Monday nighter last week, but he's still underpriced to me at $5,200 as a pretty big part of that Chargers offense. Jared Cook 9th among all tight ends in targets through 4 weeks. So he just seems too cheap for me. He's kind of like a way you can kind of make a different Charger stack rather than using one of the wide receivers. Maybe use one of the wide receivers, but then also throw in Jared Cook.
Yeah, another guy who probably didn't get the bump because of the numbers coming on Monday night. Probably would be higher than 5,200 this week if they had played on Sunday. Defense, I'm starting with the Vikings at 3,900 here against the Lions. The defense is okay. The matchup is terrific, especially because the Lions are missing their starting center. They're missing the starting left tackle. They might be missing their starting right tackle, who might be their starting left tackle when Taylor Decker's out. That's Penei Sewell. Either way, the Lions are missing at least 2 starting offensive linemen. It could be a big day for Danielle Hunter. That could make things erratic for Jared Goff, who's played pretty well so far, has not been a terrific matchup for team defenses. I think that changes in this game. At the very least, I think there's huge upside to it.
Yeah, for me, it's either the Vikings or the Steelers, $100 more at $4,000. Would definitely rather have it be Drew Lock if you're using the Steelers D. I do think it's going to be Bridgewater. But again, we mentioned Cortland Sutton banged up. We know they're going to be without Jerry Jeudy and KJ Hamler. And man, that Broncos Steelers game, there's not going to be a lot of offense involved there. So I think the Steelers are a pretty safe play.
Yeah, that's why on the other side too, I'll consider the Broncos at 4,400 for a GPP because of low ownership and Worthlessberger. I mean, he just looks like an upside matchup right now for defenses, and the Broncos are good on defense. Obviously, maybe it doesn't work, but there's plenty of upside to that one. And if I get to the end of my lineup building and I've got some extra cash, the Patriots at $5,000 makes some sense. I think the price on them is going to keep them from being as highly owned as they might normally be in this matchup with Houston.
Yeah, definitely like New England if you can get to them. I like the Bucks up there too. They have those issues in the secondary, but man, that pass rush should be a major mismatch against the Finns O-line. And again, if you're getting 40 plus pass plays from Miami, that's a lot of sack and interception upside for the Bucks.
Yeah, and they do get Jason Pierre-Paul back this week. They get Jamel Dean back at corner this week, which doesn't make a huge difference for the coverage matchups against the wideouts, but it's at least a guy who's a top 3 corner to begin the season for him who's going to be back in the lineup. All right, that's going to do it for this Week 5 FanDuel podcast. Head over to DraftSharks.com now. Get more player recommendations. Kevin English has your cash game picks. Corey Bushlin has your top GPP options. And then play with the lineup generator to build your own lineups with the help of the DS projections and FanShare ownership projections. For more discussion of DFS and other formats, you can also join the free DraftSharks Discord. You can find the link for that in the description for this podcast. For Jared Small and the rest of the DraftSharks crew, I'm Matt Schauf saying thanks so much for swimming with us.